The day has done all it needs to do. Now only stillness remains. Let your thoughts loosen, like threads unraveling in the dark. What comes next is not to solve or to chase, just a quiet story drifting close. Perhaps it's a voice that remembers you, or a silence that has waited patiently. Let it meet you where you are, and let it lead you gently into rest. The wind howled across the Wyoming plains, carrying the scent of sagebrush and secrets. Clara Beaumont reined in her horse, her breath catching as she gazed at the silhouette of the forgotten manor. It loomed against the twilight sky, its sagging roof and broken shutters like the bones of a beast long abandoned. She'd heard the stories everyone in Bitter Creek had. The manor was cursed, they said, haunted by a spirit who wandered its halls, searching for something lost. Clara didn't believe in ghosts, but she did believe in debts. And the letter in her saddlebag, its wax seal cracked but unbroken, was a debt she couldn't ignore. She was 25 with auburn hair tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and eyes that held more questions than answers. The letter had arrived 3 days ago, penned in a trembling hand by her estranged uncle, Elias Beaumont. "Come to the manor," it read. "There's something you must know before I'm gone." Elias, the family outcast, hadn't spoken to her in years, not since her mother's funeral, when he'd whispered something about sins that linger and disappeared into the night. Now he was dying, or so the letter claimed. Clara wasn't sure what pulled her here: curiosity, duty, or the faint hope of answers about her family's fractured past. The manor's iron gate creaked as she pushed it open, her boots crunching on the gravel path. The air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. She tethered her horse, Juniper, to a gnarled post and stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned under her weight, and a faint flicker of light danced behind a cracked window. Someone was inside. Her hand hovered over the revolver at her hip, a habit from years of riding alone. She knocked, the sound swallowed by the vast emptiness of the plains. The door opened slowly, revealing a man she barely recognized. Elias was a shadow of the robust figure from her childhood. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, but they lit up when he saw her. "Clara," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves. "You came." He stepped aside, gesturing her into a foyer draped in dust and cobwebs. A chandelier hung crookily, its crystals catching the dim glow of a single lantern. The air smelled of mildew and something sweeter, like faded roses. "Uncle Elias," Clara said, her tone guarded. "What's this about? Why now?" She pulled the letter from her coat, holding it like a shield. Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he shuffled toward a parlor, where a fire crackled weakly in a massive stone hearth. He sank into a threadbare armchair, motioning for her to sit. She chose to stand, her eyes scanning the room. Portraits lined the walls, their subjects' faces blurred by time, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. "There's no easy way to say this," Elias began, coughing into a handkerchief. "This place, it's not what it seems. The manor holds a story, one I've kept from you, from everyone." He paused, his gaze drifting to the fire. "It's about her, the woman who never left." Clara's heart skipped. "Her? Who are you talking about?" She stepped closer, her boots scuffing the warped floorboards. Elias's eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw fear in them, not of her, but of something else. Something older. Her name was Lillian, he said softly. She was your great aunt, your grandmother's sister. She lived here, loved here, and died here. But she's still here, Clara. In the walls, in the air. She's waiting. Clara's laugh was sharp, cutting through the quiet. You're telling me this place is haunted? Uncle, I rode 3 days for ghost stories. But even as she spoke, a chill crept up her spine. The fire flickered, casting shadows that seemed to twist into shapes. A hand, a face, a fleeting silhouette. Not stories, Elias said, his voice firm despite his frailty. Truth. Lillian was betrayed, Clara. By family. By love. She made a promise of vow that binds this house even now. I thought I could escape it, but it pulls you back. It pulled me back. And now it's called you. Clara's hand tightened on the letter. What does this have to do with me? Why am I here? Elias leaned forward, his eyes burning with urgency. Because you're the last of us. The last Beaumont who can set her free. There's something she needs, something only you can find. It's hidden here in the Manor, but you have to be careful. She's not unkind, but she's restless, and she doesn't trust easily. A floorboard creaked upstairs, sharp and deliberate, like a footstep. Clara's head snapped up, her pulse quickening. Who else is here? She demanded, her hand drifting to her revolver again. Elias shook his head. No one living. Not tonight. He coughed again, harder this time, and Clara noticed a faint red stain on his handkerchief. Stay, Clara. Just for a few days. Find what she's looking for. Please. She wanted to argue, to turn and ride back to Bitter Creek. But something in Elias's voice, desperation, maybe, or guilt held her in place. And there was something else, too. A feeling, faint but persistent, like a whisper at the edge of her thoughts. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was curiosity, tugging at her like a current. Fine, she said at last. I'll stay. But I'm not chasing ghosts, Uncle. I'm here for answers. She crossed her arms, trying to ignore the way the shadows seemed to lean closer. Elias nodded, relief washing over his face. That's all I ask. Your room's upstairs, second door on the left. Be careful where you step. The Manor, it remembers. As Clara climbed the creaking staircase, her lantern casting long, wavering shadows, she couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching her. The air was thick, the silence too heavy. At the top of the stairs, she paused, glancing down the hall. A faint glow flickered beneath a door at the far end. Not her room, but something else. Something waiting. She tightened her grip on the lantern and turned away. Whatever this place was, whatever Lillian wanted, Clara would face it on her terms. But as she stepped into her room and closed the door, a soft hum filled the air, a melody, faint and mournful, like a lullaby from a forgotten time. Clara woke to the sound of her own heartbeat, loud in the stillness of the forgotten Manor. The room was cold, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and something floral, like wilting petals. Her lantern had burned out during the night, leaving only a sliver of moonlight to carve shadows across the walls. She lay still, her breath shallow, listening. The hum she'd heard before sleeping, the faint, mournful melody, was gone. But something else lingered, a feeling that she wasn't alone. She sat up, her quilt slipping to the floor. The bed creaked, and the sound seemed to echo, as if the house itself was answering. Clara rubbed her eyes, trying to shake the fog of a dream she couldn't quite recall. Something about a woman in white, her face hidden, her hands reaching out. She pushed the thought aside and swung her legs over the bed, her boots still on from the night before. She hadn't meant to fall asleep fully dressed, but exhaustion had won. The room was sparse, a rickety bed, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a single window boarded shut. Clara lit a fresh lantern, its glow pushing back the shadows. She glanced at the mirror, half expecting to see someone else staring back. Her own reflection looked tired, her auburn hair tangled, her green eyes sharp with unease. She turned away, grabbing her coat and revolver. If she was going to stay in this place, she'd start by exploring it. Downstairs, the manor was silent. Elias's door was closed, and no light seeped from beneath it. Clara didn't knock. He'd looked frail enough last night that she figured he needed rest. Instead, she moved through the foyer, her footsteps muffled by a threadbare rug. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch her again, their faded faces holding secrets she couldn't decipher. One painting caught her eye, a woman in a high-necked dress, her dark hair pinned up, her expression caught between sorrow and defiance. Clara leaned closer, squinting at the nameplate. Lillian Beaumont, 1865. Her great-aunt, the woman Elias had spoken of. She reached out, her fingers brushing the frame. The air shifted, a cool draft curling around her wrist like a touch. Clara pulled back, her heart stuttering. "Get a grip," she muttered, her voice loud in the quiet. She wasn't here to jump at shadows. She was here for answers, something tangible, not ghost stories. The parlor was as she'd left it, the fire now a pile of ash. A stack of books sat on a side table, their leather covers cracked with age. Clara picked one up, its title barely legible, The History of Bitter Creek. She flipped through it, finding pages marked with notes in Elias's shaky handwriting. One passage was underlined, asterisk, the Beaumont family built their legacy on promises and broke it with betrayal. Clara frowned, setting the book down. What had her family done? And why did it fall to her to fix it? Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since yesterday's ride. She found the kitchen down a narrow hallway, its shelves lined with dusty jars and rusted tins. A loaf of bread sat on the counter, surprisingly fresh, next to a jar of preserves. Elias must have prepared for her arrival. She sliced the bread, spreading the preserve with a knife she found in a drawer. As she ate, she noticed a door at the far end of the kitchen, its wood warped but sturdy, with a heavy iron lock. Curious, she tried the handle. It didn't budge. She set her plate down and examined the lock. It was old, the kind that needed a skeleton key. She patted her pockets, then remembered the letter from Elias. Tucked inside its envelope was a small, tarnished key she hadn't noticed before. Her pulse quickened as she fitted it into the lock. It turned with a groan and the door swung open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Clara hesitated, her lantern casting a weak glow down the steps. The air from below was damp, carrying a faint sweetness that reminded her of the scent in her room. She took a step, then another, the stairs creaking under her weight. The basement was vast, its walls lined with shelves of bottles and crates, relics of a time when the manor was alive with people. At the far end, a wooden chest sat alone, its surface carved with intricate roses. She knelt before it, her fingers tracing the carvings. The chest was unlocked, its lid heavy but yielding. Inside, she found a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon, a locket, and a small leather-bound journal. She opened the locket first, revealing a miniature portrait of a woman who looked strikingly like the one in the painting upstairs, Lillian. The letters were addressed to her, written in a bold, slanted hand. Clara skimmed one, her breath catching at the words, "My heart is yours, but they'll never let us be." She tucked the letters and locket into her coat, then opened the journal. Its pages were filled with Lillian's handwriting, elegant but hurried, as if she'd been afraid of being caught. The first entry read, "Asterisk, they think they can control me, but love is stronger than their lies. I'll keep my promise, no matter the cost." Clara's chest tightened. Love. Betrayal. A promise. Ilias's words echoed in her mind, and she felt that same tug of curiosity, stronger now, pulling her deeper. A soft sound broke her focus, a rustle, like fabric dragging across stone. She stood, her lantern swinging, its light catching nothing but shadows. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steady despite the prickle at the back of her neck. No answer came, but the air grew colder, the sweetness sharper. She closed the chest, her hands trembling slightly, and backed toward the stairs. As she climbed, the rustle came again, closer this time. Clara spun, her revolver half drawn, but the basement was empty. Her lantern flickered, and for a moment she thought she saw a figure in white at the edge of the light, its edges soft, like mist. She blinked, and it was gone. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to keep moving, locking the door behind her. Back in the kitchen, she leaned against the counter, catching her breath. The journal and letters felt heavy in her coat, like they carried more than just words. Whatever Lillian's story was, it was tied to this house and to Clara. She wasn't sure she believed in spirits, but something was here, watching, waiting. And she was starting to think it wasn't just Elias who'd called her to the manor. Clara sat at the kitchen table, the lantern casting a warm glow over the letters and journal she'd found in the basement. The manor was quiet now, the rustle from below a fading memory, though her skin still prickled at the thought of it. She untied the ribbon around the letters, spreading them out carefully. There were 5 in total, each sealed with a wax stamp bearing a rose Lillian's mark, she assumed. The ink was faded but legible, and the words carried a weight that made her chest ache. The first letter began, "Asterisk, my dearest Lillian, I write this under moonlight, knowing they watch my every move. But my heart is yours, and no walls can hold it." The signature was simple, James. Clara's brow furrowed. Who was James? Elias hadn't mentioned him, but the passion in the words suggested a love that burned bright and dangerous. She read on, each letter more desperate than the last. James spoke of secret meetings in the manor's garden, of promises made under starlight, and of a family, her family, the Beaumonts, who stood in their way. "They'll tear us apart," he wrote in one, "but I'd rather die than let you go." Clara set the letters down, her fingers lingering on the last one. It ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if James had been interrupted. "Meet me tonight by the old oak." The rest was a smudge of ink, like it had been crumpled in haste. She opened the journal next, hoping for clarity. Lillian's entries were scattered, some dated, some not. One caught her eye, written in a hurried scrawl, "Asterisk, They know. Father found the letters. He says James is beneath us, that I'll ruin the family name. But I won't let them cage me. I'll run if I must. Clara's heart raced. The Beaumonts had been wealthy once, landowners with a reputation to uphold. Had Lillian's love for James threatened that? She flipped to another entry, dated a month later. Asterisk, he's gone. They sent him away, and I'm trapped here. But I swore to him, and I'll keep my vow, even if it takes my last breath. The words sent a chill through her. What vow? And what had happened to James? She closed the journal, her mind spinning. The manor felt alive with echoes of Lillian's story, each creak and sigh of the house a reminder of its past. Clara stood, pacing the kitchen. She needed to talk to Elias, to press him for more. But as she turned toward the hallway, a soft knock came from the front door. She froze, her hand instinctively moving to her revolver. Who could be here, in the middle of nowhere, at this hour? She crept to the foyer, the lantern trembling in her grip. The knock came again, sharper this time. Clara steadied herself and opened the door, revealing a man in a weathered duster coat, his hat pulled low. He was tall, with a jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes that glinted in the lantern light. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice low and smooth like a river over stones. "Name's Samuel. I'm passing through, saw the light. Mind if I trouble you for some water?" Clara's grip on the revolver tightened, hidden behind the door. "It's late," she said, her tone even. "And this isn't a rest stop." The man, Samuel, smiled, a slow, easy grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Fair enough. But the plains are unkind this time of night. Just hoping for a kindness in return." Something about him set her on edge, but she couldn't place it. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots caked with dust from the trail. He didn't look dangerous, but looks could lie. "Wait here," she said, closing the door partway. She fetched a canteen from the kitchen, filling it from a jug Elias had left out. When she returned, Samuel was leaning against the porch railing, gazing at the manor like he knew it. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, taking the canteen. His fingers brushed hers, cool and deliberate. "This place, it's got a reputation. You staying here alone?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp, searching. "Not alone," Clara lied, her voice firm. "My uncle's here, and we're not looking for company." Samuel nodded, tipping his hat. "Understood. I'll be on my way then. But if you need anything, I'm camped a mile west, by the creek." He turned, his silhouette blending into the darkness as he walked away. Clara locked the door, her pulse still racing. She didn't trust Samuel, not with his too smooth words and lingering gaze, but she had bigger problems than a stranger on the road. She returned to the kitchen, gathering the letters and journal. As she did, a faint hum drifted through the air, the same melody from last night, soft and mournful. It seemed to come from upstairs, pulling her like a tide. She climbed at the staircase, her lantern casting shadows that danced like figures in a dream. The hum grew clearer, a woman's voice, wordless but heavy with longing. It led her past her room, to the door at the end of the hall, the one she'd seen glowing last night. She hesitated, her hand on the knob. The air was colder here, the floral scent stronger. She turned the knob, and the door opened with a groan. The room beyond was a bedroom, frozen in time. A canopy bed stood against one wall, its lace curtains yellowed with age. A vanity held a silver brush and a vial of perfume, its glass clouded. On the wall hung a mirror, its surface rippled like water. Clara stepped closer, her reflection wavering. For a moment she thought she saw another face, a woman's, pale and sharp-featured, her eyes wide with urgency. Clara gasped, stumbling back. The hum stopped, and the room was silent again. She left the room quickly, locking the door behind her. Her hands shook as she clutched the journal and letters, her mind racing. Lillian's story was more than a tragedy, it was a wound, still bleeding in this house. And Clara was starting to feel it pulling her in, deeper than she'd ever meant to go. Clara stood in the hallway, the locked door to Lillian's room behind her, the journal and letters still clutched against her chest. The manor was silent now, the hum of the melody gone, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. Her lantern flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to sway, as if the house itself were breathing. She took a steadying breath, her mind wrestling with what she'd seen in the mirror, that fleeting glimpse of a woman's face, pale and urgent. It wasn't her imagination. She was sure of that, but she wasn't ready to call it a ghost, not yet. She returned to her room, setting the lantern on the dresser. The cracked mirror reflected her face, and she avoided looking too long, half afraid of what else she might see. She sat on the bed, spreading the letters and journal before her. Lillian's words echoed in her mind, promises, betrayal, a vow that bound her to this place. Clara needed more than fragments. She needed the whole story, and Elias was the only one who could fill in the gaps. Morning light filtered through the boarded window when she woke, her neck stiff from falling asleep over the journal. She hadn't meant to doze off, but the weight of the night had pulled her under. She gathered the letters and journal, tucking them into her coat, and headed downstairs. The foyer was bathed in a soft gray glow, dust motes drifting lazily in the air. Elias's door was still closed, and Clara knocked lightly. No answer. She knocked again, louder, her unease growing. "Uncle Elias?" She called, her voice echoing in the empty house. Silence. She tried the handle, and the door creaked open, revealing a small bedroom. The bed was made, but Elias wasn't there. A single candle burned on the neat stand, its wax pooled around the base, as if it had been left burning all night. Clara's stomach twisted. Where was he? He'd been too frail to wander far, and the manor was miles from anywhere. She searched the parlor, the kitchen, even the basement door, which was still locked. No sign of him. Her boots echoed as she returned to the foyer, her eyes drawn to the front door. It was slightly ajar, a thin sliver of daylight cutting through the gloom. She hadn't left it open last night. She'd locked it after Samuel's visit. Her hand drifted to her revolver as she stepped outside. The porch creaked under her weight, and the air was crisp, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dew. Juniper, her horse, snorted softly from the post where she'd been tethered. Clara scanned the horizon, the plains stretching endlessly under a pale sky. No sign of Elias, but something caught her eye, a set of footprints in the dust, leading from the porch toward the overgrown garden at the side of the manor. They were uneven, as if made by someone unsteady on their feet. She followed the trail, her boots crunching through brittle weeds. The garden was a tangle of thorns and wilted roses, its beauty long faded. At its center stood an ancient oak, its branches gnarled and heavy. The footprints stopped at its base, where the earth was disturbed, like someone had knelt there. Clara crouched, her fingers brushing the soil. It was soft, recently turned. Her heart quickened. Had Elias come here? And why? As she stood, a glint of metal caught her eye, half buried in the dirt. She dug carefully, unearthing a small, tarnished ring. It was simple, with a single rose etched into the band. Clara held it up, the sunlight catching its surface. It felt warm, heavier than it looked, like it carried a story of its own. She slipped it into her pocket, her mind racing. Was this what Lillian was searching for? Or was it something else tied to James and their forbidden love? A rustle came from the garden's edge, sharp and sudden. Clara spun, her revolver drawn, her eyes scanning the thorny tangle. Elias? She called, her voice steady, despite the thud of her pulse. No answer, but the weeds swayed, as if someone had just passed through. She took a step forward, then stopped. The air grew colder, the floral scent from last night returning, stronger now. Her breath caught as the rustle came again, closer, like footsteps in the grass. She backed toward the oak, her grip on the revolver tightening. The garden was empty, but she felt eyes on her, unseen but heavy. "Show yourself," she said, her voice low. The wind picked up, carrying that faint hum again, the melody, soft and mournful, weaving through the thorns. Clara's skin prickled, her gaze darting to the manor. A figure stood at an upstairs window, pale and still, watching her. It was gone in a blink, but her heart pounded. She turned back to the house, the ring burning a hole in her pocket. She needed to find Elias to demand answers about Lillian, James, and this place. But as she reached the porch, she noticed something else, a scrap of cloth caught on a thorn near the garden's edge. It was thin, almost translucent, like a piece of lace from a dress long forgotten. Clara's fingers trembled as she touched it. It was cold, impossibly soft, and it crumbled to dust in her hand. Inside, the manor felt different, quieter, as if it were holding its breath. Clara checked Elias's room again, finding a small notebook on his nightstand she hadn't noticed before. Its pages were filled with his handwriting, frantic and uneven, asterisk-y. "She's restless tonight. She knows Clara's here. The ring, it's the key, but it's not enough." Clara's chest tightened. Elias knew about the ring. Why hadn't he told her? She closed the notebook, her resolve hardening. She'd search the manor, top to bottom, until she found Elias or the truth, whichever came first. But as she stepped into the hallway, the hum returned, louder now, pulling her toward the staircase. The air was thick with that floral scent, and the shadows seemed to lean closer, whispering secrets she wasn't ready to hear. Clara's boots echoed on the staircase as she followed the hum, the mournful melody weaving through the air like a thread pulling her forward. The ring in her pocket felt heavier with each step, its etched rose pressing against her thoughts. The manor was alive with whispers, not sounds she could name, but a feeling like the house was watching, waiting for her to unravel its secrets. She clutched the notebook from Elias's room, its cryptic words about the ring and Lillian burning in her mind. Where was he? And why did it feel like the manor itself was guiding her now? At the top of the stairs, the hum grew louder, coming from the locked room at the end of the hall, Lillian's room. Clara hesitated, her hand on the knob. The door was cold, the air thick with that familiar floral scent, sharper now, almost cloying. She turned the key she'd found in Ilias's letter, and the lock clicked open with a reluctant groan. The room beyond was just as she'd left it. The canopy bed with its yellowed lace, the vanity with its clouded perfume vial, the rippled mirror reflecting her uneasy silhouette. But something was different. The air felt heavier, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. She set the lantern down and opened Elias's notebook, hoping for clarity. His scrawl was frantic. Asterisk. The ring was her promise to James, but it's only part of what she needs. She won't rest until it's whole. Clara frowned, pulling the ring from her pocket. It glinted in the lantern light, simple but deliberate, like a vow etched in metal. What was missing? She turned to Lillian's journal, flipping to a new entry. Asterisk, they took everything, my love, my freedom. But I hid what matters most. They'll never find it, not in the walls, not in the earth. Clara's pulse quickened. Something hidden, something the Beaumonts had tried to erase. She searched the room, her hands moving over the vanity, the bed frame, the faded wallpaper. Under the bed, her fingers brushed something cold, a small brass box tucked against the wall. It was locked, but the key from Elias's letter fit perfectly. Inside was a single item, a folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle. Clara unfolded it carefully, revealing a sketch of the Manor's garden, with an X marked near the oak where she'd found the ring. Below it, in Lillian's elegant hand, were the words, asterisk where we swore it waits. Clara's heart raced. The oak, the ring. Whatever Lillian needed, it was tied to that spot. But before she could move, a soft creak came from the hallway. She froze, her hand on her revolver. The sound was deliberate, like a footstep on loose floorboards. Elias? She called, her voice steady but sharp. No answer. The hum stopped abruptly, leaving a silence that pressed against her ears. She stepped into the hall, lantern raised. The shadows seemed to shift, curling at the edges of her vision. At the far end, near her room, a door stood slightly ajar, one she hadn't noticed before. It wasn't locked, and it opened into a narrow staircase leading upward to the attic. The air was musty, thick with dust, and the floral scent followed her like a shadow. She climbed, each step creaking, her lantern casting jagged shapes on the walls. The attic was a maze of crates and forgotten furniture, draped in cobwebs. A single window let in a sliver of daylight, illuminating a small table in the center. On it sat a music box, its wood polished despite the years, a rose carved into its lid. Clara's breath caught. The melody she'd been hearing, it came from this. She turned the crank, and the hum filled the air, soft and mournful, the same lullaby that had haunted her since she arrived. As it played, the air grew colder, and she felt that presence again, closer now, like a hand just out of reach. She opened the music box, finding a folded letter inside, its edges worn but intact. It was from James, but the tone was different, urgent, almost pleading. Asterisk, Lillian, they're coming for me. If I don't make it, keep it safe. That's all we have left, asterisk. Clara's chest tightened. Keep what safe? The ring? Something else? She tucked the letter into her coat, her mind racing. The music box slowed, its melody fading, and for a moment, she thought she saw a figure in the corner, a woman in white, her face blurred, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Clara blinked, and the attic was empty again. She descended the stairs, her thoughts a tangle of clues. The ring, the sketch, the music box. Whatever Lillian and James had hidden, it was in the garden near the oak. But as she reached the foyer, she heard a new sound, a low, rhythmic thud, coming from outside. She stepped onto the porch, her revolver drawn, and saw a figure in the distance, near the garden. It was Elias, his frail form hunched over a shovel, digging at the base of the oak. "Elias?" she shouted, running toward him. He didn't turn, his movements frantic, almost possessed. As she reached him, he collapsed, the shovel falling from his hands. Clara knelt beside him, her heart pounding. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice sharp with worry. His eyes met hers, wild and desperate. "It's there, Clara," he rasped. "Under the oak. She showed me last night." He coughed, a wet, rattling sound, and Clara saw the red stain on his lips. "Find it. For her." His hand gripped hers, cold and trembling, before his eyes fluttered closed. Clara's breath caught. She shook him gently, but he didn't stir. Panic rose in her chest, but the hum returned, soft and insistent, pulling her gaze to the oak. The earth where Elias had been digging was loose, waiting. Whatever Lillian needed, it was close, and Clara couldn't turn back now. Clara knelt beside Elias, her hands trembling as she checked his pulse. It was faint, a fragile thread beneath her fingers, but he was alive. The shovel lay discarded in the dirt, its blade caked with earth from the oak's base. The hum lingered in the air, soft and insistent, like a voice urging her forward. She glanced at the disturbed soil, her mind racing with Elias's words. "Asterisk, it's there, Clara." Under the oak? Asterisk? Whatever Lillian needed, it was buried here, and Elias had risked everything to find it. She couldn't let his effort be for nothing. She stood, her lantern casting a wavering glow over the garden. The manor loomed behind her, its windows dark, like eyes watching her every move. Clara grabbed the shovel, its handle cold and rough, and began to dig. The earth was soft, yielding easily, but each spadeful felt heavier, as if the ground itself resisted her. The floral scent grew stronger, mingling with the damp smell of soil, and the hum seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, guiding her deeper. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt slippery in the manor's shadow. Her arms ached, but she kept digging, driven by the weight of the ring in her pocket and the sketch in Lillian's journal. The X marked on the map was precise, pointing to this spot. Finally, her shovel hit something solid, a dull thud that sent a jolt through her. She dropped to her knees, clawing at the dirt with her hands, unearthing a small, iron-bound box. Its surface was rusted, etched with the same rose pattern as the ring. Clara's breath caught as she pried it open. Inside, wrapped in a faded cloth, was a locket, not the one she'd found in the basement, but a twin, its silver tarnished but intact. She opened it, revealing two miniature portraits, one of Lillian, her eyes bright with defiance, and one of a man with sharp features and a gentle smile. James, she was sure. Tucked beside the locket was a single page, torn from a journal, its edges frayed. Lillian's handwriting filled it. Asterisk, they can take him from me, but not this. Our vow is here, bound forever. If you find it, keep it safe. Clara's chest tightened. This was it, the thing Lillian had hidden, the vow she died to protect. But what did it mean? She tucked the locket and page into her coat, next to the ring and letters, and stood, her eyes on Elias. He stirred, a low groan escaping his lips. "Clara," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Did you find it?" "Yes," she said, kneeling again. "But you need to tell me what it is, Elias. What's this vow? What happened to Lillian and James?" His eyes fluttered, struggling to focus. "Not here," he rasped. "Inside. Show you." He pointed weakly toward the manor, his hand trembling. Clara helped him to his feet, supporting his frail weight as they stumbled back to the house. The porch creaked under them, and the front door swung open without her touch, as if inviting them in. She settled Elias in the parlor, stoking the fire to warm him. His face was ashen, but his eyes burned with urgency. "The locket," he said, coughing. "It's theirs, Lillian and James. They swore to be together, no matter what. But the family, they wouldn't allow it." Clara sat across from him, the locket heavy in her hand. "Why not? Who was James?" She pressed, her voice sharp with frustration. Elias's gaze drifted to the fire, his voice low. "James was a ranch hand, worked the land for your great-grandfather. Lillian loved him, but he was no match in their eyes. They wanted her to marry a landowner, someone with wealth. When she refused, they locked her in this house. And James, they made sure he was gone. Gone how?" Clara's heart pounded, the pieces of Lillian's story falling into place like shards of broken glass. Elias shook his head, his lips tight. "I don't know everything. Only that he disappeared, and Lillian never recovered. She died here, Clara, alone. But she never stopped looking for him. That's why she's still here." The fire crackled, and the hum returned, faint but clear, drifting from upstairs. Clara's skin prickled. "What does she want from me?" she asked, her voice softer now, almost a plea. Elias met her gaze, his eyes heavy with guilt. To finish what she started, the locket, the ring, they're pieces of her vow. "There's one more thing, Clara. Something she hid to keep it from them. Find it, and she'll be free." Clara stood, her mind a storm of questions. The hum grew louder, pulling her toward the staircase. She glanced at Elias, who nodded weakly. "Go," he whispered. "She's waiting." Clutching the locket, she climbed the stairs, the air growing colder with each step. The melody led her back to Lillian's room, the door now ajar, a faint glow spilling into the hall. Inside, the room was unchanged, but the mirror on the wall seemed to shimmer, its surface rippling like a pond. Clara approached, her reflection wavering. The hum was loud now, almost a voice, and as she stared, the mirror showed not her face, but Lillian's, pale, sharp-featured, her eyes pleading. Clara's breath caught, her hand tightening on the locket. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The mirror flickered, and an image appeared, the garden, the oak, and a figure digging just as she had. Then it shifted, showing a hidden panel in the parlor's hearth, a brick slightly askew. Clara blinked, and the mirror was her own reflection again, the hum fading to silence. Her heart raced. The parlor. She turned, rushing downstairs, the locket and ring burning in her pocket. Elias was asleep by the fire, his breathing shallow but steady. Clara knelt by the hearth, her fingers searching the bricks. One was loose, just as the mirror had shown. She pried it free, revealing a small hollow. Inside was a silk pouch, its contents heavy. Her hands shook as she opened it, revealing a single key, its handle shaped like a rose. The hum returned, soft and final, like a sigh of relief. Clara held the rose-shaped key in her palm, its weight grounding her as the hum faded into silence. The parlor fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across Elias's sleeping form, his chest rising and falling unevenly. The manor felt quieter now, as if it had exhaled a long-held breath, but Clara's pulse still raced. The key, the locket, the ring, they were pieces of Lillian's vow, fragments of a love torn apart. The mirror's vision of the hidden panel had been no trick of her mind. It was a guide leading her to this moment. But what did the key unlock? And why did it feel like Lillian was watching, waiting for her next move? She tucked the key into her coat, alongside the locket and ring, and stood, her eyes scanning the parlor. The manor was a maze of secrets, each discovery pulling her deeper into Lillian's story. She needed to understand the vow, what it meant, why it bound Lillian to this place. Elias's words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, there's one more thing, Clara. Something she hid, asterisk. The key had to be the final piece, but where did it fit? She moved to the foyer, her lantern casting a soft glow over the portraits. Lillian's painting seemed sharper now, her eyes almost alive, following Clara's every step. She paused, her fingers brushing the frame, half expecting another chill or whisper. Nothing came, but the floral scent lingered, faint but persistent, like a memory woven into the walls. Clara's gaze drifted to the staircase, then to a narrow door beneath it, one she hadn't noticed before. It was plain, its wood weathered, with a small, ornate lock shaped like a rose. Her heart skipped. She pulled the key from her coat and fitted it into the lock. It turned smoothly, the door opening with a soft creak, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of earth and old stone, and the hum returned, barely audible, like a distant lullaby. Clara hesitated, her lantern trembling in her grip. The basement had been unsettling, but this felt different, deeper, more hidden, like a place the manor had kept secret even from itself. She descended, each step echoing in the narrow shaft. The staircase ended at a stone chamber, its walls damp and moss-covered. A single iron door stood at the far end, its surface etched with roses, like the chest in the basement. Clara's breath caught. This was no ordinary room, it felt sacred, like a vault for something precious. She approached the door, her lantern casting long shadows that seemed to dance, mimicking figures locked in an endless waltz. The key fit the lock perfectly, turning with a heavy click. The door groaned open, revealing a small circular room. In its center stood a stone pedestal, and on it, a glass case holding a single object, a delicate silver bracelet, its links shaped like tiny roses, glinting in the lantern light. Clara's chest tightened. This wasn't the final piece of Lillian's vow. She lifted the case, her fingers brushing the bracelet. It was warm, impossibly so, like it held the heat of a living hand. As she touched it, the hum surged, filling the room with a melody so clear it felt like a voice. The air shimmered, and for a moment, Clara saw her not in the mirror, but here, standing before the pedestal. Lillian was pale, her dark hair loose, her white dress flowing like mist. Her eyes were sad but fierce, fixed on Clara with a quiet intensity. "You found it," the figure seemed to say, though her lips didn't move. "Now, keep it whole." Clara's heart pounded, her hand tightening on the bracelet. "What do you want me to do?" she whispered, her voice shaking. The vision flickered, and Lillian's form wavered, but her gaze held steady. The hum softened, and an image flashed in Clara's mind: the oak in the garden, the locket, ring, and bracelet placed together in the earth under the stars. Then silence, and Lillian was gone, leaving only the echo of her presence. Clara stood frozen, the bracelet warm in her hand. She understood now, or thought she did. Lillian's vow wasn't just words. It was these objects, symbols of her love for James, hidden to protect them from her family's wrath. Together, they held her promise, and only by reuniting them could Clara set her free. But why the oak? And what had happened to James, whose portrait rested in the locket beside Lillian's? She left the chamber, locking the door behind her, and climbed back to the foyer. The manor felt different, calmer, but expectant, like it knew the end was near. Elias was awake when she returned to the parlor, his eyes clearer but still heavy with exhaustion. "You found it," he said, his voice a whisper, as if he'd sensed the bracelet's weight in her coat. Clara sat beside him, holding the bracelet out. "This, the locket, the ring, what are they, Elias? Why does she need them?" Elias's hands trembled as he touched the bracelet, his fingers tracing the rose links. "They're her heart," he said softly. "She and James made a vow under that oak to be together, always. These were their tokens, proof of their love. But when James was taken, Lillian hid them, piece by piece, so the family couldn't destroy them." "Taken where?" Clara pressed, her frustration rising. Elias's gaze dropped, his voice barely audible. "I don't know. My father, your great-grandfather, never spoke of it. Only that James was gone, and Lillian, she broke after that. She died in this house, Clara, but her love didn't. It's what keeps her here." Clara's throat tightened. She stood, pacing the parlor, the bracelet glinting in her hand. "She showed me the oak," she said, almost to herself. "I need to bring them there together." Elias nodded, his eyes glistening. "Do it, Clara. For her. For all of us." As she turned toward the door, a shadow moved outside the window, a figure tall and lean, too quick to be Elias. Clara's hand flew to her revolver, her mind flashing to Samuel, the stranger from last night. Was he watching her? Or was it something else, drawn by the manor's awakening? The hum returned, soft and urgent, pulling her toward the garden, and she knew she couldn't wait any longer. Clara stepped into the night, the air cool and sharp against her skin. The manor loomed behind her, its silhouette a jagged scar against the starlit sky. The hum was faint now, a whisper woven into the wind, guiding her toward the garden. The locket, ring, and bracelet weighed heavy in her coat, each piece a fragment of Lillian's vow, pulsing with a quiet urgency. The oak stood at the garden's heart, its gnarled branches reaching like hands toward the heavens. Clara's boots crunched through the brittle weeds, her lantern casting a golden pool that barely pushed back the darkness. She knelt at the oak's base where she'd dug before, the earth still loose from her earlier efforts. The memory of Elias collapsing here, shovel in hand, sent a pang through her chest. He was resting now, safe by the parlor fire, but his words echoed. Asterisk, do it, Clara? For her. She set the lantern down and pulled the items from her coat, the locket with its twin portraits, the ring with its etched rose, the bracelet with its delicate links. They gleamed in the moonlight, as if recognizing each other after years apart. Clara's hands trembled as she placed them in the soil, arranging them carefully, like an offering. The hum grew louder, a melody that seemed to rise from the earth itself, wrapping around her like a lullaby. She began to cover them with dirt, each handful feeling like a step closer to Lillian's freedom. But as she worked, a rustle came from the garden's edge, sharp and deliberate. Her head snapped up, her hand reaching for her revolver. The shadows shifted, and for a moment she thought she saw a figure tall, lean, like the one at the window. "Samuel?" she called, her voice low but firm. No answer, only the wind sighing through the thorns. She stood, revolver in hand, her eyes scanning the darkness. The hum faltered, as if startled, and the air grew colder, the floral scent sharper. Clara's heart pounded, but she held her ground. "If you're there, show yourself," she said, her tone daring the shadows to answer. Nothing moved, and after a long moment she turned back to the oak, her pulse still racing. She finished burying the items, patting the earth smooth. The hum returned, softer now, almost peaceful, like a sigh of relief. Clara stood, brushing dirt from her hands, and gazed at the oak. "Is this what you wanted, Lillian?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The wind stirred, carrying the melody one last time, and for a moment she felt a warmth at her side, like a hand resting gently on her shoulder. She turned, but no one was there. Back inside, the manor felt different, lighter, as if a weight had lifted. Elias was awake, sipping water from a tin cup, his face less gaunt in the firelight. "It's done," Clara said, sitting beside him. "I buried them under the oak, like she showed me." Elias's eyes glistened, and he nodded, a faint smile breaking through his exhaustion. "You did well, Clara. She's closer now, closer to rest." Clara leaned back, the fire's warmth easing the tension in her shoulders. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice soft. Elias's gaze drifted to the flames. "She'll let you know. If there's more, she'll show you. But you've given her hope, Clara. That's more than I ever did." His words carried a guilt she didn't fully understand, but she let it pass, too tired to press him further. She climbed the stairs to her room, the manor quiet except for the creak of her boots. Lillian's door was closed, no glow seeping from beneath it, and the air lacked that floral scent. Clara paused, her hand on her own door, and glanced at the mirror in her room. Her reflection was steady, no trace of another face. She exhaled, setting the lantern down, and sank onto the bed, the weight of the night settling over her. Sleep came slowly, her dreams filled with fragments of the manor, Lillian's face, James's portrait, the oak under starlight. But one image lingered, a man standing in the garden, not Samuel, but someone else, his face hidden, his hands outstretched. She woke with a start, dawn's light filtering through the boarded window. The manor was silent, no hum, no whispers, but the dream clung to her, unsettling and vivid. Downstairs, Elias was in the kitchen, slicing bread with shaky hands. He looked better, a faint color in his cheeks. "Morning," he said, his voice stronger. "Thought you'd need something to eat before you decide what's next." Clara sat, taking a slice, her mind still on the dream. "Elias," she said carefully. "Did Lillian ever mention anyone else? Someone tied to James, maybe?" Elias paused, his knife hovering. "Not that I know," he said, but his eyes flickered, like he was holding something back. "Why?" Clara hesitated, then shook her head. "Just a dream," she muttered, but the image of the man in the garden wouldn't leave her. She finished her bread, her resolve hardening. The vow was buried, but something felt unfinished, like a thread left dangling. As she stepped outside to check on Juniper, her horse, she noticed fresh tracks in the dust near the porch boots, not hers or Elias's, leading toward the garden. Her stomach tightened. Samuel or someone else? She followed them, revolver at her side, and found the oak undisturbed, the earth still smooth where she'd buried the items. But near the garden's edge, caught on a thorn, was another scrap of lace, like the one she'd found before, soft and cold to the touch. Clara's breath caught. She glanced at the manor, its windows dark, and felt a pull, not from the oak, but from the plains beyond, where the tracks led. Lillian's vow was close to complete, but something or someone was still out there, waiting for her to find it. Clara stood at the garden's edge, the scrap of lace crumbling in her fingers, its delicate threads dissolving like a memory. The boot tracks stretched into the plains, faint but deliberate, disappearing into the sagebrush under the early morning sun. Her heart thudded. The image of the man from her dream, his face hidden, hands outstretched lingering like a shadow. Samuel's smooth voice and sharp eyes flashed in her mind, but these tracks felt different, older, as if they belonged to someone who knew the manor's secrets, as well as Lillian did. She glanced back at the oak, the earth still smooth where she'd buried the locket, ring, and bracelet. Lillian's vow was almost complete, but this new thread pulled her beyond the manor's walls. She returned to the house, her boots echoing in the foyer. Elias was in the parlor, hunched over a cup of coffee, his hands steadier than yesterday. "You're up early," he said, his voice gruff but warm. Clara didn't sit, her mind too restless. "I found tracks outside," she said, holding up the scrap of lace. "And this. It's like the one from yesterday, Elias. Who's out there?" Elias's eyes widened, his cup trembling slightly. "Tracks?" He repeated, his voice low. "Could be Samuel, that drifter you mentioned." But his gaze darted to the window, and Clara caught a flicker of unease. He wasn't telling her everything. She leaned closer, her tone sharp. "If you know something, Elias, say it. I'm tired of half-truths. What's out there, and what does it have to do with Lillian?" He sighed, rubbing his temple. "I don't know for sure, Clara, but there were stories, ones my father told me, about a man who came back years after Lillian died. Not James, but someone close to him, maybe a brother or a friend. He was looking for something, same as you. Never found it, far as I know." Elias's voice dropped, almost a whisper. "Some said he never left the plains, that he's still out there, tied to her." Clara's chest tightened. A man tied to Lillian, haunting the plains? It sounded like another ghost story, but the tracks were real, and so was the lace. She grabbed her coat and revolver, her resolve hardening. "I'm following them," she said. "If there's answers out there, I'm finding them." Elias reached for her arm, his grip weak but urgent. "Be careful, Clara. The manor's one thing, it's hers. But the plains, they hold their own secrets. She nodded, stepping outside. Juniper was saddled and ready, her breath steaming in the cool air. Clara mounted, her eyes tracing the tracks westward toward the creek Samuel had mentioned. The plains stretched wide, a sea of sage and dust, the manor shrinking behind her. The hum was gone, but the floral scent lingered, faint and teasing, like Lillian was with her still. The tracks led to a narrow creek, its banks lined with willows. Clara dismounted, tethering Juniper to a low branch. The water was shallow, glinting under the sun, and the tracks stopped at its edge, as if whoever made them had vanished. She scanned the area, her hand on her revolver. A glint caught her eye, a small metal object half buried in the mud. She knelt, digging it out, a pocket watch, its face cracked, its hands frozen at midnight. The back was engraved with a single word, James. Clara's breath caught. James, Lillian's love, lost to her family's cruelty. Had this been his? And who had left it here? She turned it over, finding a faint inscription inside. Asterisk, to my brother, forever yours. Her heart raced. Elias had mentioned a man, maybe a brother, searching for something. Could this be his watch, left behind as a marker? She slipped it into her pocket, her mind spinning with questions. A rustle came from the willows, sharp and close. Clara spun, revolver drawn, her eyes darting through the branches. "Show yourself," she called, her voice steady, despite the prickle at her neck. The wind stirred, carrying that floral scent, and for a moment she thought she saw a figure, a man, tall and shadowed, his face obscured, standing across the creek. He raised a hand, as if pointing further west, then vanished, like mist in the sun. Clara's pulse pounded, but she didn't hesitate. She crossed the creek, her boots sinking into the mud, and found new tracks on the other side, fresher now, leading toward a low rise. The air grew colder, the scent stronger, and the hum returned, faint but clear, guiding her forward. At the top of the rise, she saw a small, weathered grave marker, half hidden by sagebrush. The name was worn but legible, Thomas, brother of James. Her knees weakened. Thomas, James's brother, tied to Lillian's vow by grief or loyalty. Had he come here searching for answers only to be lost to the plains? Clara knelt, her fingers brushing the stone. The hum swelled, and an image flashed in her mind. Lillian at the oak, weeping, placing something in Thomas's hands, a letter sealed with a rose. Then darkness, and the hum faded. Clara stood, the watch heavy in her pocket. Thomas had been part of this, a keeper of Lillian's vow, but he hadn't found what she needed. The letter, was it the one in the music box or something else? She turned back to Juniper, her resolve firm. The manor held the final piece. She was sure of it, and Lillian was guiding her to it, step by step. As she rode back, the plains seemed to watch her, the wind carrying whispers she couldn't quite hear. The manor came into view, its windows glinting like eyes, and Clara felt a pull, stronger now, toward Lillian's room. Whatever Thomas had carried, whatever Lillian had hidden, it was waiting for her, and she was ready to face it. Clara rode back to the forgotten manor, the pocket watch heavy in her coat. Its inscription, "To my brother, forever yours," burning in her mind. The plains stretched silent around her, the sagebrush swaying under a sky bruised with clouds. The hum was gone, but the floral scent clung to the air, faint and persistent, like Lillian's presence trailing her every step. The grave marker of Thomas, James's brother, had shifted something in her. This wasn't just Lillian's story anymore. It was a web of loss and loyalty stretching across years, pulling Clara deeper than she'd ever meant to go. She tethered Juniper to the post and stepped onto the porch, the boards creaking under her boots. The manor was quiet, its windows dark, but it felt alive, expectant, as if it knew she was close to unraveling its heart. Inside, Elias was in the parlor, his frail form hunched by the fire, a blanket over his shoulders. He looked up as she entered, his eyes sharp despite his weariness. "You found something," he said, not a question but a statement, his voice low. Clara pulled the watch from her pocket, holding it out. This was by the creek, with tracks leading to a grave. Thomas, James's brother. Elias's hand trembled as he took the watch, his fingers tracing the engraving. His face tightened, a flicker of guilt crossing his features. "Thomas," he murmured. "I didn't know. Not for sure. My father mentioned him once, said he came looking for answers after James vanished. Never left, they said. What happened to him?" Clara asked, her tone sharp with frustration. Elias shook his head, his eyes distant. "No one knows. Some said he died of grief, others that the planes took him. But if he's tied to Lillian..." He trailed off, handing the watch back. "What else did you see?" Clara hesitated, the image of the shadowed man by the creek flashing in her mind. "A figure," she said finally. "Not Samuel. Someone else, pointing west, toward the grave. And Lillian, she showed me something, a letter in Thomas's hands." Elias's gaze sharpened, but he said nothing, his silence heavy with things unsaid. She didn't press him. The manor was calling her now, the pull stronger than ever, leading her upstairs. The air grew colder as she climbed, the floral scent thickening. Lillian's door was ajar, a faint glow spilling into the hall, like a beacon. Clara stepped inside, her lantern casting soft light over the room. The mirror on the wall shimmered, its surface rippling, and the hum returned, soft and mournful, weaving through the air like a lullaby. She approached the mirror, her reflection wavering. "Lillian," she whispered, her voice steady despite the thud of her heart. "Show me what's left." The mirror flickered, and an image formed, not the garden this time, but the attic, the music box glowing on its table. Clara's breath caught. She'd found a letter there before, from James, but nothing about Thomas. Was there more? She climbed to the attic, the narrow staircase creaking under her weight. The music box sat where she'd left it, its rose-carved lid gleaming in the lantern light. She opened it, the melody spilling out, and searched inside. Her fingers brushed something new, a hidden compartment in the base, springing open with a soft click. Inside was a single letter, sealed with a rose stamp, addressed to Thomas in Lillian's elegant hand. Clara broke the seal, her hands trembling. The letter was short, its words heavy with grief. Asterisk Thomas, I failed him. They took James, and I couldn't stop them. But our vow lives, hidden where we stood. If you find it, keep it safe, for him, for me. Clara's chest tightened. The vow hidden where they stood. The oak again, or something else? She tucked the letter into her coat, the weight of it joining the watch, the locket, the ring, the bracelet. As the music box slowed, the hum surged, and the air shimmered. Lillian stood before her, not in the mirror, but in the attic, her form pale and translucent, her eyes pleading. "You're close," she seemed to say, her voice a whisper in the melody. "Find him." The vision faded, leaving Clara alone, her heart pounding. Find him, James? Thomas? Or someone else? She descended to the parlor, the letter burning in her pocket. Elias was dozing, but he stirred as she approached. "Another letter," she said, holding it out. "From Lillian to Thomas. She says the vow is hidden where they stood." Elias's eyes widened, his hands gripping the blanket. "The old well," he said suddenly, his voice urgent. "Behind the garden, near the oak. It's been boarded up since I was a boy. Lillian used to sit there before everything." Clara's pulse quickened. The well. She hadn't seen it in the garden, but the weeds were thick, hiding secrets. She grabbed her lantern and headed outside, the night air sharp against her skin. The garden was a tangle of thorns, but she pushed through, her eyes scanning for the well. Near the oak, half hidden by brambles, she found it, a low stone circle, its wooden cover rotted but intact. She pried it open, the wood splintering, revealing a dark shaft below. The hum returned, loud and clear, as she peered inside. Something glinted at the bottom, a small metal box, its surface etched with roses. Clara's breath caught. This wasn't the final piece of Lillian's vow. But as she reached for a rope to lower herself, a shadow moved at the garden's edge, tall and lean, the same figure from her dream. Her hand flew to her revolver, but the figure was gone, leaving only the echo of the hum and the weight of the night pressing in. Clara stood frozen at the well's edge, her lantern casting a trembling glow into the dark shaft below. The metal box at the bottom glinted faintly, a rose-etched promise waiting to be claimed. The hum pulsed around her, Lillian's melody weaving through the night air, urgent and clear, as if the manor itself were pleading with her to finish what she'd started. The shadow at the garden's edge was gone, but its presence lingered, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Her hand tightened on her revolver, her eyes scanning the thorny tangle for any sign of movement. The plains were silent, the stars cold and distant above. She shook off the unease and tied a rope to the oak, testing its strength before lowering herself into the well. The air grew damp and heavy, the floral scent mixing with the musty smell of stone. Her boots scraped against the walls as she descended, her lantern swaying, its light barely reaching the bottom. The box was small, no larger than a book, its surface worn but intact. She grabbed it, tucking it under her arm, and climbed back up, her heart pounding with each pull of the rope. Back on solid ground, Clara knelt by the oak, her breath ragged. The box was locked, but the rose-shaped key from the parlor's hearth fit perfectly. Inside was a single item of folded cloth, its edges frayed but soft, wrapped around a small leather-bound book. Clara's fingers trembled as she opened it. The pages were filled with James's handwriting, bold and hurried, a diary of his final days. The last entry read, **, they're coming for me tonight. Lillian, my love, I hid our vow where we stood, under the stars. If I don't return, find Thomas. He'll keep it safe." Clara's chest ached. The vow hidden where they stood. The oak, the well, the token she'd gathered, it was all part of their promise, a love the Beaumonts had tried to erase. She flipped through the book, finding a sketch of the well, an X marking the spot where she'd found the box. Beside it, James had written, "For Lillian, forever." Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away, closing the book. This was what Lillian needed. Not just the tokens, but the truth of their love, preserved against time. The hum swelled, and Clara felt a warmth beside her, like a presence settling close. She looked up, half expecting to see Lillian, but the garden was empty, the manor's windows dark. The melody softened, a lullaby now, guiding her back to the house. She carried the box inside, her steps heavy with the weight of what she'd found. Elias was in the parlor, his eyes bright with hope as she entered. "You found it," he said, his voice trembling. "What is it?" Clara set the box on the table, opening it to show him the book. "James's diary," she said softly. "It's their story, his and Lillian's. Their vow hidden all this time." Elias reached for the book, his hand shaking as he traced the pages. "She kept it safe," he murmured. "All these years, she protected it." "What do I do now?" Clara asked, her voice quiet but firm. Elias's gaze met hers, heavy with years of guilt. "Read it," he said, "out loud under the oak where they made their vow. Let her hear it. Let her know it's whole." Clara nodded, her throat tight. She stood, taking the book and lantern, and returned to the garden, the night air cool against her skin. Under the oak, she opened the diary, her voice steady as she began to read. "Lillian, my heart, we stood here under these stars, promising forever." The words spilled out, James's love and despair filling the air. The hum joined her, soft at first, then rising, a chorus of longing and release. Clara read of their secret meetings, their stolen moments, the Beaumont's betrayal that tore them apart. Her voice broke as she reached the final entry, James's plea to Lillian, his hope that Thomas would carry their vow. As she finished, the hum peaked, then fell silent, the air still and warm. A light flickered at the garden's edge, not a shadow this time, but a soft glow, like moonlight on water. Lillian stood there, her form clear now, her face no longer blurred. Beside her was James, his hand in hers, their eyes bright with peace. Clara's breath caught, tears spilling down her cheeks. They didn't speak, but their gaze held hers, a silent thank you, before they faded into the night. Clara stood, the book heavy in her hands. The manor felt different now, its weight lifted, its shadows softer. She returned to the parlor, where Elias waited, his eyes searching her face. "It's done," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They're free." Elias nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "You did it, Clara. You gave them rest." She sat beside him, the fire crackling softly. The manor was quiet, no hum, no whispers, only the gentle creak of the house settling. But as Clara closed her eyes, a faint rustle came from outside, like footsteps in the grass. Her hand twitched toward her revolver, but she stopped. It wasn't Samuel or Thomas or even Lillian. It was the plains, whispering their own secrets, ones she wasn't meant to chase, not tonight. Clara woke to a quiet she hadn't felt before in the forgotten manor. The air was soft, free of the floral scent that had trailed her like a shadow. Sunlight slipped through the cracks in the boarded window, dusting her room with a gentle glow. The hum was gone. The weight of Lillian's presence lifted, as if the house had finally exhaled. She sat up, the memory of last night, Lillian and James, under the oak, their silent gratitude warming her chest. The leather-bound book, James's diary, rested on the dresser, its pages still carrying the echo of their vow. She dressed quickly, her boots scuffing the floor as she headed downstairs. The manor felt different, its creaks softer, its shadows less watchful. Elias was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of coffee, his movements slow but steadier than before. He looked up, a faint smile breaking through his weathered face. "Morning, Clara," he said, his voice warm. "Sleep well?" "Better than I expected," she admitted, taking a seat. Elias poured her a cup, the steam curling between them. "It's quiet today," he said, his eyes drifting to the window. "She's at rest, isn't she?" Clara nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. "They both are. Lillian and James. I saw them, Elias, under the oak. They were together." Elias's smile deepened, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You did what I never could," he said softly. "You gave them peace." He paused, then added, "What's next for you? Back to Bitter Creek?" Clara didn't answer right away. The plains stretched beyond the window, vast and open, but the manor still held her, its story not quite finished in her heart. "I don't know," she said finally. "There's something about this place. It's not just theirs anymore. It's ours too." Elias nodded, as if he understood. They sat in silence, the coffee growing cold, the manor wrapping them in its newfound calm. But as Clara stood to clear the table, a faint sound caught her ear, a soft rustle, like fabric brushing stone, coming from the foyer. Her hand drifted to her revolver, though the instinct felt unnecessary now. She stepped into the foyer, Elias following slowly behind. The front door was closed, the portraits on the walls still, but a single rose lay on the floor, its petals fresh and red, as if plucked moments ago. Clara's breath caught. It wasn't from the garden, the roses there were long dead. She knelt, picking it up, its scent sweet and familiar, like Lillian's presence one last time. "Her way of saying goodbye," Elias said, his voice thick. Clara nodded, her throat tight. She placed the rose on the parlor table, beside James's diary, and stepped outside to check on Juniper. The horse snorted softly, ready for whatever came next. Clara's eyes drifted to the garden, the oak standing tall, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. The earth beneath it was undisturbed, the locket, ring, and bracelet safe in their resting place. As she saddled Juniper, a figure appeared at the horizon, not the shadowed man from her dream, but Samuel, his duster coat flapping in the wind. He raised a hand in greeting, his smile as smooth as ever. Clara's hand hovered near her revolver, but she relaxed, sensing no threat. "Morning, ma'am," he called, stopping a respectful distance away. "Just passing through. Thought I'd check if you're still in one piece." "I am," Clara said, her tone even. "No thanks to strangers wandering the plains." Samuel chuckled, his eyes glinting. "Fair enough. But this place, it's different today. Quieter. You do something to it?" Clara's gaze sharpened, but she didn't answer. Samuel tipped his hat, his smile lingering. "Safe travels, then. Maybe I'll see you in Bitter Creek." He turned, his boots kicking up dust as he walked away. Clara watched him go, her mind turning over his words. Had he sensed Lillian's presence, or was he just fishing for stories? She shook her head, mounting Juniper. The manor stood behind her, its sagging roof less ominous in the daylight. She glanced at Elias, who'd followed her to the porch, his frail form leaning against the railing. "You'll be all right here?" she asked. He nodded, a spark of strength in his eyes. "I will. This place is home, Clara. Always has been." He paused, then added, "Come back sometime. The manor will be waiting." Clara smiled, a warmth spreading through her. "I might," she said, turning Juniper toward the plains. As she rode away, the manor grew smaller, its silhouette softening against the sky. The plains whispered around her, their secrets tucked into the sagebrush, no longer pulling at her. Lillian and James were free, their vow whole, their love remembered. But as Clara crested a rise, she glanced back one last time. A faint glow flickered in an upstairs window, Lillian's room, perhaps, or just the sun catching glass. She smiled, urging Juniper forward, the rose's scent lingering in her memory. Not all spirits seek to frighten. Some just wish to be remembered. If their tale lingered with you, let it rest with your breath. Sleep well tonight. And if you hear a whisper in your dreams, maybe it's just the end of the story.